Hello and welcome to the show. If you've been following the series, you know it's all about inspirational people in our community doing great things and being great mentors. This week we have none other than the great superstar, British superstar as far as I'm concerned, Junior Giscombe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for asking
The
me.
legend. The legend, man. You are a legend indeed. How are you?
Very well.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Busy?
very
No
well.
doubt?
Busy, British collective, a new junior album and single coming in the summer.
Okay.
Touring at the back end of the year. So, yeah, it's.
So we've got Junior having a single out.
Yeah, you got
album
Junior.
out.
Junior's gonna have a single out in July, August, and album should be out September.
Oh, it's that far ahead already.
Yeah, we've been working on it for a few years. It's not been something that just came about.
Right.
This project. It was about 3 years in the making, pretty much. I went to Jamaica, and my daughter kept on at me about every time we go to Jamaica, you never go down, you never see none of the artists, you never hang out with none of the artists. You always just us.
Yeah, the family.
Yeah, and so I turned and I said to her at the time, like, I'd love to do all of that, but like right now my head's centered here,
With the
and
family.
then it's family, it's our time. And if I go and make a record and go on TV, all of a sudden I can't walk street anymore, and I like to walk street.
Yeah.
So,
Relaxed and
yeah.
And,
So she kept on about it and kept on about it. So I decided, I went down about 3 years ago it was, I went down and I decided to hook up with Luciana, and we did a version of Mama Used to Say, which sounded absolutely fantastic. And
So that trip, did you have to go down on your own so that you
No,
could focus,
it was-
or would you still with the
I
family?
was still with the family. I took down all my grandkids and the wife and everybody. We all just went, my kids, and we all just went down. So it was about 15 of us in total that
Wow.
we went down. And it was fantastic. We had a lovely hotel that we got for them, and the kids had a fantastic time. But it was during that time she kept on about me and on it. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do this. So I went there, got together with Lucci, went in and we recorded Mama Used to Say, and I thought, this sounds really good. Played it to her, and she was like, that's what I'm talking about. This is what you should be doing. This is that. I'm like, oh, please, little girl. You know? Oh, please.
When your children start mentoring you.
When they start mentoring you, you've got a problem there. You know, like, oh. So that went on for a little while. Unfortunately, my daughter got ill and passed.
Right, yes, I know that was last year, wasn't
That
it?
was last year. But what it did was it gave me 6 months of doing nothing at all. I'd been looking after her for like 8 years prior, and her mother for like 20 years prior. So I'd been dealing with multiple sclerosis from
Oh, they both had it, did they?
Yeah.
Right,
So her mother had it first, and unfortunately she passed.
okay.
And then I had Janique, as I have always had, and unfortunately Janique passed.
How old was she?
She was 32 at the time.
Right.
But she was a real inspiration for this project, because it was her
Words and pressure
tenacity
to
and pressure
do it.
to do it. So I went back to Jamaica and started talking to various artists and decided that I'd like Maxi Priest on one track, and I'd like Freddie
So
McGregor.
is Maxi in Jamaica or is he here?
No, Maxi's world. Maxi's in Maxi's world.
Global.
So, Maxi's very global, so it's a matter of actually like just getting hold of him, and we've known one another for a long time, so that's not really a problem. And Freddie McGregor, I've always been a fan of Freddie McGregor, and I wanted to do something with Freddie as well. Marcia Griffiths, I've always been a fan of, and I wanted to do something with her. Janet Kay, I've known from we were children.
Well, yeah, 'cause she's here,
Carol,
right?
And Carol, because she's here. And Paulette Taja, who I thought was fantastic. And then there was new people in Jamaica, like a young lady on the album called Pinky Famous. She won a talent contest in Jamaica, a brand new girl. And I wanted to do that too, and then have young people.
So
who
this
were
is a
new.
reggae album?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, it's like, what I did was I decided to take the songs that were popular of mine and just relook at them and do them in reggae. So the first single would be Mama Used to Say with Stephen Marley. We've just finished that now, so that's going to be the first single. So we're looking to do the video in a couple of weeks' time, and have all of that ready for summer too.
Right.
So it's been, her passing has inspired me to work hard in a short
Yeah, it's giving you
space
the
of time.
impetus to really make it happen.
Very much so. And it's kind of like I'm at that point. I can't wait to see what happens when we drop the single and how people take to it. I think it's still relevant, and we'll see how relevant it is. But I'm excited, very excited.
But yeah, when you're a creative, you're always excited about what you create, even if other people aren't.
Well, this is it, to be quite honest with you. You know what I'm saying, right? But you kind of hope what you're doing is you're making music, and you know, I've gone through the whole thing of making music for myself, right? So I think we all do as musicians and writers, you want to touch. That's your emphasis. Your emphasis is to touch people with what you want to do. So to be able to have started 30 odd years ago now with a song everybody thinks it's Mama Used to Say, but 2 years prior to Mama Used to Say, I'd put a record out called Get Up and Dance, Hot Up and Heated, which went to #1 in France.
Okay.
And I had no idea it was a #1 record. I went to France when I had Mama Used to Say. I was doing a show and everybody started booing and I was singing Mama Used to Say and I couldn't believe it because it was #1 in France. And we are moving far. You know what I'm saying? One of them, what, Jesus, what weird, what. And then all of a sudden they started shouting, get up and dance, get up. And I couldn't stop laughing. I thought,
what?
You're having a laugh. And then the guy played the tune. I'm like, it's about 6,000 people there. And it was very early in my career, so I was sweating and everything. What do you do? The guy put the tune on. Place went absolutely mad, and I sang this song, and I couldn't believe it, mate. I've never done it since.
Really?
Only in France, right? I do that song.
Do
right?
they even know it here?
They don't know it here. They don't know it in
I was going to say, because that seems to
Yeah, that's gone over everybody's head. But that was really the beginning. That was what got me signed to London Records and Phonogram Records at the time.
Right.
Was that record. It wasn't that I was discovered by this great A&R man who heard my music and said, wow, hey, you know, I know I could make him a star. Yeah. No, I'd already done my thing and it had already broken.
Yeah, grafted.
So they were aware of the fact. I had about 5 years prior to that, I'd gone in with some kids from school, some friends of mine, and a little small label just out of South London in Balham. They put out a record on us called Nice and Slow, which I found out afterwards was a #1 in Australia for me. Right? Again, I didn't know this until going out there.
But the thing is, when you've got these #1s in France, weren't you getting paid for them?
No, I didn't know what was going on. When the first one happened with Nice and Slow, I mean, nobody told me it was a #1. I was like 15, 16. I didn't know. I just made a record and thought that like it would be played in England.
So right, let's go to the beginnings. Tell me about the early Junior. Growing up, family.
Well, youngest of 7. So
7.
Yeah, 7 brothers and sisters. So
okay.
it was
So you lived in Buckingham Palace, I think.
No, we lived down in Clapham South. We were very similar. We lived in a very white area. We were the only black family in the area.
Oh, you're a South London boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, you know, Clapham South, if those back in 30, 40, 50 years ago could tell you, Clam was very white, it was a lovely place to live.
Right.
Really nice place to live. And the people in the area were fantastic. Were lovely. We lived 3 doors away from a police station. So the policeman,
you felt safe.
the policeman knew us.
Yeah.
So that was another thing. My parents used to have parties, and when they'd have parties, they'd have
and nobody would trouble you.
They'd come down the road. They'd come in and they'd knock on the door and they'd ask for my dad. My dad would come to the door. They'd have a little word with him. Daddy would tell them to come in, and they'd come round the back. They'd sit round the back, and my mum would give them something to eat. Right? I mean, everything was kicking off in my house at that time. But those policemen used to sit down there, and every now and again they'd say, oh, Mr. Giscombe, just tell him to turn it down a bit. This time we had a big old sound system in there. Right? Just tell him to turn it down a bit. right? And my father would smile and walk away, come back, it'd be exactly the same. Nice one, you know, nice one. You know, and they'd have a whiskey or something. It'd either be whiskey or vodka.
Well, he's playing them with food and drink, and they're not even realizing the sound's not going down.
But the beauty of the times in saying all of that was that these people were beginning, and I'm saying these people, the people within England at that time, my area at that time, was beginning to forge a relationship, trying to understand us.
Right.
And what made us work, what made us tick, what made us happy. You could walk along the road and a policeman would call out your name. It wasn't like, oh, you, he'd call your name. Yeah. So I came from a different time in where I lived, an era, and in that time. But during that time, by the time I got to about 14, they started with a curfew in England. And again, because of knife crime and all kinds of different things that they tried to say. And again, what they did at that time, they made sure that they polarized it on young black youth.
Right.
Now, during that period of time, our parents wouldn't believe the kind of harassments that we were getting at that time. So our parents were very much police. If the police says this, then it's that. The police says that, then it's this. For my mother, who was very much that way, she went out with a friend of hers down in Brixton, and her son was waiting outside, the friend's son was waiting outside, and they went inside to buy some stuff. He got taken up by the police, and they started saying that they wanted to search him and whatever else. The little boy must have been 12 or 13. And my mum and my mum's friend was coming out of a shop when they were, from what my mother said, was putting his hand up, right, to search him. So they both came out and asked why. Police told them not to ask any questions. He's out here, we suspect him. So the woman said, but that's my son. I just left him out here with my shopping. They still continued to have this argument. But what came from it was the first time for my mother
to really understand what was going on.
To really understand
when I'm saying harassed.
When I'm saying we're being harassed, when I'm saying that this is this, you now witnessed it. So it wasn't that she went against the police, but she wasn't for the police. And whereas the police, we had them down the road, as I said. So whereas they could have come in and said something, my mum would have taken it. She wasn't taking it. She'd have to go off and she'd like survey this, she'd have to find out, she'd ask questions and whatever else. So I came from that kind of environment where you were open, but you saw that there was still this kind of closed thing going on.
Right.
So by the time I got to 16, I had a conversation with my mum and dad. They wanted to know what direction I was going to take in life, what I was going to do. So I'd watched my brothers, my 2 older brothers and my sisters, and everybody's gone out and they've done a 9-to-5 job, you know. And they're coming in, they're out every morning and they're back in every evening. And, you know, it looked like they all seem to be earning money and they're doing well. And everybody's talking about they want to get pregnant and they want to get married, and you know, because everything was everything was looking great. But to me, it didn't look that great. You know, it never looked that great to me because I was looking at the fact that, hold on a minute, my mum and dad's been working all their life for a house and a car, for a house and a car.
Not even freedom.
Right? What's that? Could be that's still on loan, so you still have to work to ensure you keep that house and a car. I get it. You had all of these children, so you had to have a house and everything. I get it. But I wasn't doing what you were doing for it. I'm not doing that. So I had this meeting with them, and I turned around and my mum said to me, so, Junior, what you want to do with your life?
I think I can see where this conversation is going to go before we even get there, but I'll let you finish. This is your story.
The woman said to me, so, what are you going to do with your life? Father said, yes. You know, you're 16 now and
learn a trade.
You know, you can either go college or... My father was a class act carpenter, you know, he one of the best. He did Abbey Road and stuff like that, you know. He was one of them men, a master at his craft. So my father turned around and said, "But boy, I can ask my people them, where I work, for get in and look a job, and if you want to do, like architecture." I mean, you're crazy. I don't architecture, but I'm standing there still being polite, not saying
And
anything.
respectful as you have to be because they're your
Right?
parents.
And then when my mum turned and said to me, "But Julia, you can go and do like a plumbing or electrician, become an electrician."
Now it's getting silly.
Well, that was it for me. I said, "Listen, I want to be able to eat pork when I want to eat pork, chicken when I want to eat chicken, beef when I want to eat beef, steak when I want to eat steak." And my mum and dad just looked at me like, "No, look at this little boy." What am I talking about? Him want to eat that and him want to eat this. You eat what you can get. Nah, mommy. Well, I was fortunate. After that, at 16, I put a band together. 17, 18, and the band was called Atlantis. And we went out, everybody was doing jazz funk at the time, and Junior wants to go left centre, per usual. And I didn't want to play that. I wanted to play something that was more authentic to Britain, so I wanted to make it rock funk. So I got a guitarist who could play rock and roll, I got a bass guy who could play bass, I got a drummer, and we had a 3-piece. And then we went out and we started playing dates. I went out and booked dates as well, certain pubs and stuff like this. And my little 3-piece was playing, man, we were bad. And then I got 2 other guys to come in, and it's 6 of us now, right, singing. We played Ronnie Scott's and mashed it down. We played some places up in Birmingham, killed them up there. And we were my beginnings of writing songs too.
I was going to say, so was this your material you were singing and performing, or was it covers?
I was determined. I was a real badass when I was a kid. I was thinking, no, I'm not going to do anybody else's songs. Why? We're going to write our own songs. So we go out there and we write these songs, and people be listening to these songs and don't know one song, right? But paid us and gave us the courtesy of actually listening. Weren't booed, weren't anything. And that was the other thing that inspired me. It must have been good.
Because we weren't stopped.
We weren't stopped. We weren't stopped.
That's usually a good sign if the audience don't stone you. You're doing quite well.
We weren't stopped. So we got to that 18, 19, and then because I've been doing a lot of running up and down and the touring and stuff, I wanted to know more about the technical side of this, and I wanted to go into the studio. And a guy called Junior Douglas rang me out of the blue, said to me that he'd been given a budget to make an album, had some music but didn't have it all, right? And heard about me through somebody else. Would I be interested in writing the songs for this album? So I said, yeah, no problem. So I went down to the studio, went in, I heard a couple of the songs, I took them away, and that's when I wrote Get Up and Dance, Hot Up and Heated, which was the kids, my niece and nephew were running about my house, and I kept singing this Get Up and Dance, Hot Up and Heated hook. And then I left it alone, and they were running around and they started singing it, and it sounded pretty good, so I thought, I'll have that. And that's how that tune came about, Get Up and Dance. So that was that period I
Get Up and Dance, Hot Up and Heated.
Yeah. But Get Up and Dance is one side and Hot Up and Heated is the other side.
Oh, okay.
So it's A and B, but both of them did incredibly well for me. But that period of that Get Up and Dance period of that record being played, that record starting to make some noise, the small little label going off and cutting a deal with Phonogram, and you're in the middle of the deal when you're young and you don't fully understand what's going on. Yeah. And then you realize that you're not making as much money as you're supposed to be making.
Some representation
you get the representation, but the representation ain't that great either, because the representation is, as you go along, you find out that's connected to that guy, and this one's connected to that one. So you're coming in not fully grasping that it's called business.
Yeah.
You're coming in still music.
Yeah.
Right.
And
so
excited that somebody wants to take your music seriously.
I couldn't believe when we did the deal and was doing, Mama used to say, and I had control of being able to do it, nobody telling me how to make the record. And I could do this, and I'm still learning my craft, I'm still learning my trade, but I could do this. And we did it, and it was presented, and they loved it. And then they turned and said, yeah, but you know, it's too rock and rolly. But my A&R man at the time, a guy called Roger Ames, was absolutely fantastic, because Roger stuck with me. I didn't have a manager. Okay. It was me. I put myself there. I managed Junior up until when everybody said, you need to get a manager, it's getting too big.
Yeah.
Up until that point.
Sometimes that's what happens, isn't it? You can't do everything.
You can't do everything.
You know, so you have to free it up to the experts to do their thing so that you can do what you do, which is create music.
Well, this is it. But and again, what was great was that what you learned from the process in terms of being able to put that whole thing together, the things that you wanted, that you were able to get, the things that you didn't know that you could get, but you got, right? The way that things were promoted and marketed when it's going, meaning with Mummy used to say, they put no money behind Mummy used to say. There wasn't this big marketing machine that happened with Mummy used to say. There was a DJ in America called Frankie Crocker. And the guy who remixed Mummy used to say, his name was called T. Scott. And he was a DJ at a place called the Paradise Garage back in New York. And T had a 1 hour slot on Frankie's show. Frankie Crocker in those days, if Frankie Crocker played your record, you were waking up to every station in America playing your record. That's how powerful Frankie was. So when Mummy used to say came out and it was being mixed by T. Scott, it was in that hour-long period he played Mummy used to say. Frankie played the track after T. Scott played it, and the following morning I had the biggest record in America. Every station in America, black, was on Mummy used to say. The record blew up without, we were selling 250,000 copies a day in America, Mummy used to say, at one stage. It was a phenomenal record at that
See
time.
how lucky we are to have him here? This is real superstar business going on here, yeah?
Yeah, but it was really phenomenal when that record took off, because I was also a part of a group called Lynx, and David Grant and Sketchmind. I was part of Lynx.
You're lying! Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, I was a part of Lynx too.
Right.
So, and we went out on tour that year, 81 going into 82. Lynx, the tour was, we outdid every major so-called pop band in the country. Spandau was supposed to be the biggest band, but Lynx turned out to be the biggest band, which we were. We sold out everywhere. It was huge, that whole thing. But while that was going on, Mama was out and Mama was doing what it was doing. So by the time I finished the Lynx tour for December, for January, February, I'm getting ready to go to America to do Soul Train. So again,
Now I've heard about this. This whole thing precedes Junior Giscombe. Well, they're like, he's the only British artist I know that's been on Soul Train.
Well, the only other British artist that's been on Soul Train was, before me, was David Bowie with Golden Years.
Golden Years, okay.
Right, and then it was me, and then I think after that they may have had Loose Ends and they may have had Soul to Soul, but first black British artist to go on Soul Train was moi.
And what year was that? Can you remember?
Gosh, that would have been 82.
Right.
April 82, that would have been. And that was neat.
The precise time, hour?
It was during the day.
That must be etched in your head. I mean, that's a very significant thing.
Yeah, because
you have all of these
career. You have all of these things that kind of like edge in there. For, you turn and you say like, Soul Train. Soul Train edged because of the fact that like on that bill was Guy and remember the group Guy?
Yeah, of course.
Teddy Riley, when they very first started their very first record, and Boys to Men, right? Yeah. And they were doing that album as well. It had just come out, so they were doing Is it really love? Little poppy thing that Jam and Lewis came up with, which was bad. But it was the three of us on this show.
Why was I just dancing?
Why,
Okay,
cause I can't let you take it to myself. But it's, dun, 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 dun. Right, but it was really good.
Yeah.
But that tune, them, Guy and myself, right, was a trip. It was a trip for me. I'd been listening to, Guy, I'd bought the first album, right? And here I was now.
Performing with them.
Yeah, and the thing was that my record was bigger than everybody's at the time. So you're the bigger artist at the time. So everybody wants to see you. And that just freaked me out because I wanted to see them. I wanted to knock on their door, they're knocking on mine. So it was again, as I said, it's a different kind of thing. Teddy came at that time, and he came to England and did it too, and was on stage in England and turned around and said the first person to do swing beat, how he got swing beat was Junior. And everybody's like, who? And he's like, yeah, Junior was the first one. It was through Junior that I made swing beat, right? Oh. So saying that to say, coming from England, here's a music form that takes on the whole world. And the creator of the music form tells you that it wasn't him, it was one of your own. And you poo-poo one of your own and kick him to the curb. No, it couldn't have been Junior, it's got to be Teddy Riley, it's got to be you! Do you get what I'm trying to say? That's the kind of environment that I was living in during the time of making those records. It could never be you. When I did Mummy used to say, everybody said it's got to be Bob Carter, because Bob was a lovely white guy who was there and did all the arrangements. But everybody says it's got to be Bob. So I say, cool. So I walk away. Bob goes off and he works with George Michael. And on the first Wham stuff, I've known George for years at that time. And George rings me up. I won't tell you the cuss words that he's cussing me about the fact that
you send this man.
I've sent him. I never sent him. You told me that he was it. I know, but it worked because it was two people and it was a vibe of those two people. Yeah. And I knew that. You took it as it couldn't have been you, Junior. So then if it couldn't be me, it's cool, then do what you're doing.
Exactly.
So you go off and
I'll just wait for the call. I'll graciously wait for the call.
Well, it happens, you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah,
it happens. So he goes off and Bob goes in with him. It doesn't work, right? He comes back. Who do you think that I should work with? I tell him to work with the engineer, and that's the engineer he's always worked with. He's never worked with anybody else. Chris. And when I met Chris was a painter and decorator who wanted a break to be able to show that he could be an engineer. So he asked Bob if Bob asked Junior if Junior would let me. And that's how we allowed him to come in, and then he went off to become a huge engineer and stuff. But it just, when I'm saying all of this, is that we all came from really humble beginnings. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
and it was more about I'm helping a mate at the same time. The mate's got the same vibe and enthusiasm and stuff. So you're creating this little vibe unit. And we were doing that when we had the success of the record. They told us we had 3 weeks to make the album, right?
To make an album?
Yeah, to make the album. We had 3 weeks to make the album. So everything was one take. So we'd go in, we'd rehearse with the band, and we'd rehearse it, and then bam, we'd put it down, we'd do the overdubs. I'd do the vocal at the same time as the band's going down, and then we'd do whatever we needed to do. That was it. Album was made within 3 weeks.
Wow.
That's why when some people they talk about, it took me 4 years, or it took me... Right, exactly. If you really needed to make an album, right? You'd make the album. Trust me. All of this, oh no, the sound isn't right here. Oh no, you'd make the album. And at that time, we had 3 weeks to make this album in. So Bob and I went in and we made this album, and it came out, which was the Jai album, and we did a couple million on the Jai album worldwide, which was fantastic. It was great. But what it also did was it opened up America to Junior and Junior to America.
Right.
And because America had taken Junior to heart so much, it was like I was going and doing promotional tours, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, spending a lot of time in America during those years and building up Billboard awards, Cashboard awards, this one awards. But what it was doing, it was giving me the chance to be in an environment with other artists and to see how other artists did what they did. At the time, hip hop was just beginning. And I was staying in Washington, and there's a place in Washington near the White House. They call it the Awakening. I don't know if you've ever, it's a hand that comes out of the ground.
Okay.
Right? And in the early 80s, hip hop wasn't being played on radio. But you could get it just like the Pirates on underground radio. And about 10, 11 o'clock at night, all the kids used to go to the Awakening. And car lights would be on and everything, but they'd be pumping hip-hop, hardcore hip-hop that nobody had ever heard and stuff. And then one night I was down there and I heard this group, NWA, right? And I thought, oh hell, what's this? You know, mate, got a copy of the album, came back home with it. Nobody had even heard of NWA because there were so many things that was going on in America at the time that wasn't coming back to England. So you were first hand on most things in terms of music and stuff, you know.
Right.
Jodeci were coming through, you know, and I've gone to a fellow musician's house down in Manhattan and it's like, hey Junior, there's these guys, you know. They're gonna be signed to Puffy's label. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool, Puffy. What, you mean the little guy who was up at MCA? Yeah, man, you remember him? Because he used to be a runner for me when I was at MCA. So I'm looking at it like that. You got to try and understand the times I'm living in, right? So Puffy's now got himself a little label and stuff. He's got these boys. And they're coming round tonight to sing for us, you know? So I'm sitting down. I think it was Jeff Red was there as well. And they come in, and they're the young kids, them times. And this little boy starts singing, which one? The gravel band, the one who sounds like Bobby Womack, right? Casey.
Okay.
He starts singing, and I'm like, wow, this youth, bad. And then the other three come in, and then the other one starts doing his thing, and I'm like, oh my God, right? And then they were so pleasant and so nice because they were so young.
Yeah.
So they had a copy of the album, you know, and they gave me a copy of the album and I asked them to sign it and they were like, really
excited,
giddy, because for them it was like they're meeting somebody that they've been watching on TV. And they're not seeing that one day they'll be on TV. So, as I said, that whole period of time, my meeting Stevie and beginning to have a great relationship with Stevie Wonder and doing a song on his album with him during that period of time and learning about that. Working with Stuart Levine, he'd done the Crusaders, who I loved to death.
Yeah,
and Stuart had produced that stuff and told me how
Crusaders. I mean, that's Styx Hooper.
Come on, man.
Joe Sample. Come on.
Man. Come on.
Wilton Felder. It doesn't get any better.
It doesn't get any better, does it? You know, all you needed was Jacques Pastorius playing bass, and that would have been it. You get what I'm saying?
Pass out.
Thank you. So, being able to be in that surroundings creatively was mind-blowing during that period.
When you get over the awe of being in the environment in the first place, then you get creative.
And then you get the creative. But then you're meeting, you know, you get people like Rick James would fix my tie before I'm going on to do a show and tell me how to shake my ass to make the girls move and stuff. I loved Rick James, and everybody used to tell me, oh no, Rick James was fantastic.
Of course.
Right, you know, the Weather Girls were great too. They mothered me. Patti LaBelle mothered me. I was cushioned in by the American artists that I met to be able to flourish in a market that I didn't know.
No. Oh, they probably could see that as well. You were
Most
probably
probably.
young. You're younger than
I was
them,
young.
number
Exactly.
one, and you're in a strange environment, and that just shows the niceness of them to welcome you and cushion you rather than.
It was incredible because after coming back from that, I had to go to an award ceremony in Hammersmith to pick up an award on behalf of Stevie. He had asked me to do it. So I said, okay, fine, I'd go. And when I went there, Five Star were there. Five Star were the big band at the time in England, and this other band was the big one and whatever else. So I've just come back from America where I'm going and I knock on somebody's door and we chat. No big, nobody was playing this star thing.
Yeah.
So I go to knock on Five Star's door to say hi. A little story here to say hi. And they turned around and I was told by their father, no, you can't just go in there and speak to them like that. And so I thought to myself, what the hell? 6 months later, mate, I'm down at, where is it? I'm in the West End. Stevie's here, Stevie Wonder's here. We're in the West End and we're at a club in the West End. And who should we see?
Five Star.
Oh, yes. And their father now is tapping me on my shoulder, right, asking me to ask Stevie if they can take a picture. So, being junior, I turned and I said, Steve, there's a group here called Five Star, and they'd like to take a picture with you. So, being Steve,
He's cool.
I'm cool, man. I ain't got no problem. I'm cool. Right, so I'm like, okay, Steve. So we come. And I'm sitting next to him, so he's holding my hand. So I get up. So he's holding me, he's like, so where you going? So I said, you gonna take the picture with the... Goddamn, no, man. If they don't want to take the picture with you, I ain't taking no goddamn picture. So I had to speak to him and say to him, no, take the picture, Steve, man. Take the picture.
It's cool. About you, it's not about me.
It's not about me, it's about them, and it's the ego and everything else. So take the picture. But what I was getting at and saying that was, this whole period you're seeing people. This whole period you're seeing who is who. This whole period you're seeing who has been given the perspective and who has taken it on board and who's running with it. In this period you're seeing all of this complete garbage that certain artists are carrying on with, and you know it's backroom people telling them that's what people want to see. Right? And you're seeing them kill themselves in what they're doing. And then everybody says, but you don't do that, Junior. I'm like, hell no, right? So with me, I kept myself further and further back from it all because what I was seeing, I didn't like. I did Swap Shop. I wrote music with PJ Robinson for the Swap Shop show. And when we did that, there was this whole big thing. You're supposed to take pictures and stuff. And I made sure I was in the back.
When the pictures were being taken.
You all take it. You that's what you're all gravitating into it for. Mine was the music.
I'll just create the art. I'll just be the
let me
artist.
make the music, man.
Yeah.
That's where I was coming from. But as I said, it was being able to do that. I went into a period after that of working with Phil Lynott and Lemmy from Motorhead and John Sykes from Whitesnake and Derek Bramble and I put a project together. Phil wanted to do an album of duet, me and him together, duets. So we wrote 5 songs together and we did that. I came out of that and that's when Beverly Hill Cop came around after that. And I did Do You Really Want My Love for Beverly Hill Cop. That would be one of my true achievements because I'd written the song on a 4-track. In my house.
Really? The old-time 4-track?
Old-track, Fostech 4-track, right? Yeah. So I'd written it, I'd done all the bouncing and everything else.
You're literally doubling up on the tracks.
You know how it goes. You remember it? The left and right, turn it in, it comes over to the left, outside.
So the 4-track becomes 8, becomes 12.
Listen, right? 16 if you really want to go there.
If you really know how. It's true.
So I've got my 4-track. I've got a guitarist come in. He's played some guitar on the track, right? I've got a Juno 6, right? And that's what I've done this on, and a DMX drum machine, man. And I'm feeling big. I get the tune finished and I give it to the record company. And when I give it to the record company, they send it straight. It's the demo. They send it straight. And it's the demo that you'll hear in the film. That's my greatest achievement in terms of...
The demo, you know?
The demo that I did.
Not even the full produced...
the full produced track ended up with me. I got Stevie to play drums on it. It was the first track that he'd ever played drums on for anybody.
So what the track that's in the actual movie
is my four-track,
is the four-track demo?
Yeah, that I did at home. Love that.
Okay.
Right, so, and how that came about, same thing, on tour in America, Eddie Murphy staying in the same hotel, but he's down below. They've given me this room where I've got all these different speakers and this, that, and the other, so I dash in my album, man, you know? And in them days, you never had no CD, it was LP, you know, wax. So I put the LP on, man, and I turned this up, way up. I know I'm out of order, because I know I'm doing the rock star thing now, you know? So turned up the thing well loud, jumping up and down, I'm banging, I'm dancing, I'm this, that, and the other, because I want him to complain. No complaints, no nothing. I leave the music on, I've gone out, you know, I've gone and done a couple of interviews, I've come back, it must have been 12, 1 o'clock, music still blurring, right? Nothing, this man ain't said nothing. I'm to leave the following day, and I thought, you know what, I took up the LP, went downstairs and put it underneath his door and left and came back to England. When I got to England, I got a phone call from the A&R man, because he's Trini, and he's like, Junior, how old this guy Eddie Murphy? Both him I make movie and him say more one of your tune in the movie. And I'm like, huh? He's like, Eddie Murphy, who is this Eddie Murphy? Because nobody knew who Eddie Murphy was. Right, in England. No, seriously, nobody knew who Eddie Murphy was, right, at the time. So me putting the track in the movie, they didn't even realize how big he was. Right, and my thing was, they kept on asking until that movie dropped. Nobody asked when the movie dropped, though, because when the movie dropped, it was like the biggest movie of that time. Yeah. So, and it just blew Eddie Murphy
Beverly Hills
up.
Cop 1 or 2?
The first one.
The first one. Okay.
The very first one, which is the one that really was the one.
Yeah.
So, again, I was involved in that. You do that. I then went off, and then I got asked to do.
But there seemed to be a period when you were quiet.
Always been.
As I mean, not maybe doing much in the industry, or maybe you were doing things behind the scenes that we didn't know about, weren't seeing.
Most probably. I mean, a lot of the time, right, because of both Nadia and Janique. Right. Okay. I did a lot of things that would be considered, say, behind the scenes. I worked with Paul Johnson. I don't know if you know about.
Of course. Okay.
When Love Comes Calling and stuff like that. I wrote and produced all of that stuff for him. So I started to do a lot more of that.
Production and writing.
Is It Good to You for Heavy D and the Boys? That's one of mine. On the Regulate album, the second single, Do You See What I See? Every Day is Warren G. That's my tune. And that started to happen a lot. So people started to ask for songs, or they would sample Mama Used to Say, or Too Late, and all this kind of stuff. So my publishing and my that side of things started to grow, so it meant that I could spend the time with both of them and be there for them. Right. So I'd play dates up and down the country, and I'd play dates.
But it had to be strategically managed in order to do the dates and still be the carer.
And still be low key. I didn't want anything splashed up. The Junior's out there, and I'd do dates and people would say like,
when did Morning Will Come? That is my tune. You have to know this. You need to know this. Okay. Morning Will Come. That is my tune.
I think Morning Will Come. Morning Will Come came around through, I'd really...
No, but come on, you know it's bad. you see? He's feeling it. Just when he hears the name, the title, feeling it.
That song was just born out of pure love for life, pure love for understanding that I'd grown to a point whereby I'd become spiritual, and I was no longer being dictated to by any religion or any outside forces. I'd gotten there. Yeah. And I wanted to say it to everybody that morning will come. Your day that day will come. today you might be suffering like hell, but there is a tomorrow, and if there is a tomorrow, you can fight, you can try.
But you can
push,
actually hear it not only in the lyrics, but I think you also need to see you performing it live. Because hearing the lyrics is one thing. You can hear the feeling in the lyrics, but then to see the expression in you when you're performing it, it's a different thing. You can really see how you feel about that tune and what it means to you. And you know, it probably rose at a time in your life, as you say, when everything seemed to be working in synchronicity.
It did.
Your mind, body, soul, spirit was working in
everything
synchronicity.
was just here. It was locked. I'd grown.
Yeah.
I'd grown up as a man. I'd taken on a responsibility with my then partner, with her illness, and at the same time took on the responsibility of ensuring that, like, you know, we could make sure that those children were going to school, that they had a life, that they didn't feel that, like, oh, poor mum or whatever else, to keep them happy during that period of time as well. I'd grown up. I'd become a man.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share that with, men. Women took it on, but I wanted to sorry guys, sorry ladies. But it was such a deep thing
No, I think
for me.
everybody took it on, really.
I'm glad they did.
Everybody took it on. But
it was, for me, it was women
those who got it, shall we say.
But those who got it, got it. I have people come up to me and tell me that they were ill or they were sick or they were in hospital, and how much that song
lifted the spirit and gave them confidence that better would come.
Mate, when you get things like that from people, and your whole drive has always been just to make music to touch. Just to be able to touch somebody, make that person feel.
But that's what it's always about with a creative, isn't it? Yeah. Because you create what you create because you love it, and you hope it makes that connection with as many people as possible. And I always laugh with DJs because, you know, they always want to keep that exclusive tune that they want to play and they've only got. I'm like, do you think this artist only wants you to play? No, they want everyone to
Come
play.
on.
The creator wants everyone to play, not just you.
The whole emphasis of making your music, is to touch people with your music.
Yeah.
My dream as a youngster was to make songs that last. That's how I used to put it to people. I just want to make songs that last. I've been so fortunate that, like, my songs, Morning Will Come, is still 20 odd years old. Mama's 30 odd years.
It's older than 20 years, isn't it?
Yeah, Morning Will Come was done in what, 90...
Early 90s.
Early 1992, 93, somewhere around there.
Yeah, so talking about the 25-year mark.
Yeah, exactly. Now. Right, and it still gets played. It's still taken, and it's still felt.
Yeah.
By new and old. Right, Mama, the same thing.
Well, I have to say, you did a nice little reggae drop on it.
Thank you.
I have to say, very nice.
That's what's coming. That's what's coming.
A nice little reggae drop the other day, I heard.
Yeah,
I was like, okay.
It's that. It's. As I said, I'd grown at that point. So by that time now, you're looking at, if I'm going to make music, what style, what kind, and then I didn't want to make a style of music. I just wanted to continue making my music.
Right.
Right. So I put out an album after I left MCA on my own label, and it was called Honesty, and I put it out in Japan, and we did 60,000 copies in Japan, and that blew my mind because it was the first independent project that I'd done, and we'd sold so many copies. So for the basis of that, it was like, right, we could make another album. I was going to make a trilogy at the time, but unfortunately Nadia got pretty sick at that period, and it took up a lot of time, so I didn't get the chance to actually finish the actual trilogy. So, but it, again, as I said, it made me see possibilities. It made me see that I did a Scorsese song for a Scorsese movie called All the Right Moves, and Tom Cruise was like the star of the movie, and I did this tune called Unison, and it came out and went to #1 in the dance charts in America. I doubt if anybody in England's ever heard it.
Right.
That's the kind of things that was happening with
But
me.
behind the scenes for you, yeah.
So I'd write something and they'd put it out and it'd become a huge hit in this country, and nobody in this country would know anything about it. And then I started to realize that that's what my music was. It wasn't just England, right? And also what was happening.
Which is good.
Brilliant.
That's a good thing.
No. That's the thing.
That you're
It meant that my
appreciated outside of your circle.
Exactly.
It means you're global, you're international, you're
But it also did
international,
though.
as some say.
But what it also did though, to be quite honest with you, what it also, that period of time and all of that, what it also did though was made me understand why was it that there was only me, and why was it that like there was all of these, there was Imagination, there was Phil Ferron, why was it that my one was the one that broke America? My one was the one that was breaking. Why was it? What was it that was happening? They weren't putting any more money into me than they were anybody else. So then I realized it's got to be the music, it's got to be the music. So my whole thing was like, music first. If you make sure that your music is of a particular standard and caliber, right? And then you present it to people, right?
Yeah.
You want people to hear the best of you.
Which really should be the benchmark through life, isn't it?
Should be.
Give it the best you can be. Give people the best you can
Of
be.
you, at any
regardless
given
what it
time.
is you're doing.
Regardless,
you know?
at any given time, if you can continue to do that and be honest with it, then people feel that. It's like, I used to say to people, I'm the kind of artist who would sit down, right, and I'll listen to a record and I'll say like, boy, they must have been fighting in the studio. And why? Listen to it.
It's all over the place.
It's all over the place. You can hear it. The mindset. The drummer's not really down. The this isn't down. And then you can hear a record like a rock record, for instance, like "Owner of a Lonely Heart," and you can hear that there was friction, but then you can hear that there was a bounce and there was some. They were smiling.
Unison,
they were lucky.
yeah.
Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Because it transmits itself through the record. Now I know people aren't listening to records in that fashion and that deeply. But that's how deep, for me, music is. You know, when I was listening to early Marvin Gaye, you know, and I say early Marvin Gaye, the poppier Marvin Gaye, and you then get to the What's Going On, and the Let's Get It On, What's Going On, and that whole cycle of music, 4 or 5 albums that he put out at that time. You look at Stevie at the same time, right? Where Music in the Key of Life came out, and these albums, Herbie Hancock at the same, with Headhunters even earlier. These albums were important statements. Miles Davis during that period of time. The albums that were coming out were important statements. Curtis Mayfield. Back to the World album from the whole thing with Vietnam and what was going on in Vietnam.
Yeah.
You had Gil Scott-Heron talking about...
Well, they were always very politically minded as well, with
very
strong
social,
messages.
But
strong
very,
messages.
very strong. But it was always social. It was. It made
what's going on in your community, what's going on in the world,
so
how it's
it
affecting.
seems like if it's political, but it wasn't political. They were all social, right? And even the love songs. You go into Sparkle, Aretha Franklin. You can go into what's her name? Oh, Betty Wright. Go back even, right? The love songs
Marlena
even.
Shaw,
Thank you. The love songs were pertaining to the environment that we would. They weren't fictitious.
Yeah. Go away, little boy. What's that about?
Come on, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, trying to make a boy a grown up, but I love you anyway. Can't let you go, even though I know you're an idiot.
Some real. Do you get what I'm saying? Very real things. For me as a child growing up was happening musically. And I grabbed to it. I grabbed to Gil Scott-Heron when he was on a label called The Flying Dutchman, and he did an album called Did You Hear What They Said? And it was about Vietnam. It was about the vets coming back from the war, and that some of them weren't in the coffins, and some of them, they wouldn't allow their parents to see them, and all of this kind of stuff. And he was speaking about that. I knew nothing about that. He then spoke about the blood banks that they had in America, where they were taking blood from people and injecting them with HIV. These were people who were on the street, who were looking, who were talking.
And telling their stories, and he was relaying it and getting it out to a broader.
So I come from that.
Yeah.
So I find it difficult in a
Because the
time.
thing is, those people telling those type of stories, because of where they come from, people wouldn't believe them.
No.
You know, they're
I
not
think-
interested, or you know, they see them almost as vermin. So it doesn't really matter if they're injecting you with stuff or if they're taking your blood or whatever.
But that's how it was in that time. And that's, for me, it was eye-opening, and it affected how I viewed the country I lived in. It affected how I viewed the people that are in higher positions in politics. It made me really look at the fact that my parents had come here and my parents had worked hard here, real hard here, right? My dad, I never saw my dad take a day off of work, much less.
Wow.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
In
yeah,
all the time that he worked here. And I just, for me, things begun to truly kick off in my head in terms of change, because I couldn't fully grasp how I could make an album. I could be a part of a project, sell 70 million albums and not have one interview on any major radio, TV or anything. And if it was a white counterpart, they would have been everywhere. I couldn't understand that at first. And I didn't want to turn around and say that it was because of colour.
Yeah.
But then as things started to project itself and started to go on in my career, I started to see how much colour affected the people who supposedly are telling you that they're colourblind.
Yeah.
And that started to change me again, because I'd gone through a period in the 80s of being a part of a troupe, let's call it, called Red Wedge. Myself, Billy Braggs and Paul Weller put it together, which was, if you like, it would have been perceived as being a political arm for the Labour Party during the time of Neil Kinnock's period.
Right.
So we went out on tour, we did all kinds of things during that period of time to highlight what was going on with gay rights, to highlight what was going on with black people.
Inequality, injustice, yes.
So we'd go down and we'd have meetings with Neil Kinnock, his wife, and various other politicians of the time.
Right.
So that made me very politically aware.
Now you see, this is what this whole thing was about, because we didn't know about these things.
Well, I'd done all of that, and that was about 87, 88. I wanted, there was no voice for black people. And if there was a voice for us, it was coming from a white perspective, meaning somebody's been telling them what to say, opposed to them
It being organic and you just expressing yourself with your experience.
So at the time of doing Red Wedge, racism in this country was paramount. It was huge. What am I call it? I used to go up to up north with Billy and Paul, and we'd see the various things that were going on up there. It was during the miners' strike. That's why we put the whole thing together. Bob Geldof had gone off and done Feed the World, and that was nice for him, but that was a ploy, and I wasn't going to be a part of all of that. When we did this was because my mum taught me charity begins at home. And what a lot of people don't fully grasp is there's a lot of black people who used to be in the mines, a hell of a lot of them back in the day.
Right.
And we go up there and you see families up there who, because of not having that mining there, have struggled. And you hear politicians turn around and call those people, what would you call them? Right? They're trying to take they're scamps, they're rubbish, they're no gooders, they should work, they should.
Yeah.
When I know, I've lived long enough to know that the politics of a particular party has made this particular environment the way it was. So we went
with the intention of destroying it, really and truly. That
Come on,
is,
they didn't like the South didn't like the North, and they wanted to destroy the North at that
with
time.
the intention of destroying it.
So you go through a period again of you're involved in this. You make records, and you're then being slammed, and you're being closed down because you were a part of. And nobody liked the fact that you were
a part of that and politically minded in that way.
Politically minded at that time
and aware
in that way,
because
and aware
they're
of what
always
was going on.
afraid of people that are aware.
So then you get closed down, so your records don't get played. you start finding that, like, oh, well, no, we can't, that giveaway that was all right on Monday, you can't do that anymore, and that's going to stop your record from going in the charts. And all of a sudden, so all of a sudden,
all the doors that were wide open saying, come in, and now being slammed in your face.
Yeah, because all of a sudden, everybody's a bit frightened because he's a bit of a maverick, isn't he? He's not managed by anybody. But he's not managed by anybody that we know, and he's sprouting off at the mouth, and we can't control him. And so if we close the doors,
he can't get into say anything and influence anybody. Yeah.
So when I said to you earlier that, like, I give thanks and I know how fortunate I am to have had success in America. If it wasn't for America and if it wasn't for the rest of Europe, I would have starved.
Yeah, or have to take a different direction.
I would have had. I don't see, music is my life, and I wouldn't have seen myself doing anything else. But it would have been how I would have been able to do that and be able to look after the family at the same time. So if it wasn't for America, I always give props for America, because during that period of time, if they weren't still playing my records, if they weren't still making me accessible,
you'd have been in a very different economic
hugely different economic position. Because, as I said, because of my involvement within politics and understanding that a lot that was being said at the time and still today, it's false prophets giving you an idea of where you should go, but they themselves wouldn't go there. And
always. I mean,
it's like anything, isn't it? It's like anything. It's like anything. You have a politician. He says, "Well, let's go to war," but he stays at home, right? And then he says, "They're fantastic. Look at our boys. They're incredible, and this, that, and the other. But you didn't give them the proper arms, and you didn't give them the proper stuff to wear."
It's not even that. It's not even about war. It's about the daily life that the politicians are telling you, the things and rules that you have to adhere to. They want you to adhere. They themselves are not. They're hiding this. They're depositing that. And
this was my problem. This was my problem. You were up in a mix that you now begun to understand exactly how the mix worked.
Morning will come.
Had to be.
Yeah.
Had to be.
How has the record industry changed?
Changed
for you, or have you? What changes have you seen from when you were first in the industry to now?
I think if there is change.
Yeah.
I would say that change is more technology.
Right.
But then that's a lie, because when I started with a band.
Okay.
By the time I made Mummy used to say I had a drum machine and a Juno, so I didn't need the keyboard player and the drummer. Yeah. And then by the time I got to Stone Lover album, so the Acquired Taste, I didn't really need anybody. I could have done everything by myself. And that's what technology had done. It actually took away from you vibing with people. And we all did that. We were all stupid. We all ran off and figured that we could make this music independently. Some of us could, but not all of us. You know what I'm saying? Some of us could, but not all of us. You know, when I say some of us could, I'm talking like a Prince.
The essence of music still is about a band, jamming with each other.
A band. The Prince would go in there and play everything. He would play everything.
It's not about.
But he'd go out there with a band because he needed a flavour.
It's not about artificially reproducing sounds on a machine.
Exactly. And
you can hear how music has changed.
And that's where it's changed for me in terms of that. And the beginnings of SSL desks, that was another one. And in terms of sound change, I was those who are technical, I was used to a desk they call Neve, which is a lot warmer. It was a kind of desk that people like Earth, Wind and Fire would use because it was a warmer sound. As soon as the technology started to flow into the music industry, they came out with what they called the SSL desk. And this was a much bigger monster, and everything was technique. It was all about the technical side of things. You could program it to do this and program it to do that.
To roast the chicken while it's doing it.
You know, so then it got tedious, you know, and then the sound of it was very thin, but people were telling you that it sounded great, but it would feel like it was cutting off the top of your ears. And now all of this came in, so the sound of what we were making texture-wise was going to change. And it did change invariably. And over the years, what has happened is lots of people have tried to get back that sound because they realize how much music has lost the warmth, the presence of being within it.
Well, that's all when they've now started to reintroduce the valve amps. Because, you know, you would play a valve amp for about 12 hours before you wanted to play.
Listen, but they still
and
have
that
mics.
Richness.
We still
of
have
sound.
mics that can be used, and you tell people you want a valve mic, and when they look at you, it's like, how long have you been recording? Because, you know, these kids were valve mic. I know what that sounds
transistor.
like. Come on, I know what that sounds like.
But
and
that
I'm
richness
sorry.
of a valve is
You cannot
and
beat
the longer you play it, the better,
it sounds.
Yeah.
But you cannot beat that sound.
Yeah.
But what we live in is
But they started to reintroduce them now, and they are ridiculous prices.
Of course,
ridiculous.
But they've got
thousands.
to. They've got to, because it's like that whole thing we were saying earlier about that cycle.
Yeah.
Right. I started out playing sound system.
Yeah, we're going back to that.
I started out playing sound system, right? So I started out playing Coxsone sound system. I was 13, 14. Used to play down at the Roaring Twenties, down in Carnaby Street. As a little boy, that's what I used to do. My mum allowed me because my two older brothers and Coxsone were friends, and if they were going up there...
South London sound here, Coxsone, understand this,
right?
South London.
In that time, you had 4 major bands. It would be Coxsone, Jew Creed, and then you'd have most probably... There was a Neverly Enchanter, right?
Seriously, we're going back to the roots.
You understand what I'm dealing? This is where I come from. That's where I came from. So valve mics, valve sound, the needles and everything. That was it for me. I can hear it now. The big old sound, the boxes, you know, the big old boxes.
How they used to get those up the stairs is beyond me.
And they play that, and they play you know, Coxsone changed the face of sound systems during that period of time too. You know, because the different clubs in the West End that would allow them to play. You know, now you can't really get nothing in the West End.
It's true, yeah.
Back in those days, they allowed them to have residencies at these clubs.
Yeah,
do you know that they were in
right,
there for years during that period of time? So that was, you know, that
a
whole...
great journey, a great journry. Tell me about British Collective.
British Collective.
A brief
British Collective. We all met up at Carl McIntosh's birthday. And Donny's making an album. Donny says, I'd like all of you to come in and sing on this tune. So we all go in and we sing on a tune called Spiritual. Spiritual goes out for Donny, and I think it must have been one of the biggest things that he had out there. So I get a phone call, boy, Junior, you know, we got to do this, you know.
And that's done though, isn't it?
And then the other one, you know, lead, yeah, we got to do this, you know. This one, we got to do this, you know. And that's how it really came about. Everybody of a spiritual realized that, like, hold on a minute.
Why are we not doing this?
Yeah,
we
should actually be doing this. This is crazy. It doesn't detract from our own careers, right? But what it does do, one, is it enhances all of our careers, and most importantly too, it shows to this young public, young kids coming into this industry and those who are already in it, that if we don't join forces and if we don't come together, we will become fractions, and that's what they want. What we need to do is understand that the power is us.
In numbers.
But the power is us.
Yeah.
That's what you need to understand. The power is us. Then you need to understand that self-worth is incredibly important for you to be able to take the next step. Because your next step means that you're going to have to fight certain people that you don't want to fight, but you need to fight them to make sure that that door's knocked down and doesn't come back again. You don't want to fight them because you figure that, like, well, boy, you know what, if I fight him, I might not get food tomorrow, and I might not this, and I might not that. What they need to understand is that if we as a people had that kind of attitude, we would still be slaves today. So you got to get your head out of that mental slavery business and fully grasp the fact that if we don't come together as a people, and especially within this industry that we're in this country that we're in, we will never have power enough to be able to change, to be able to enhance those younger ones coming in. Also being able to put them on platforms for them to be able to be seen and heard, like this platform right here. It's incredibly important because we don't have it.
Yeah.
It's incredibly important because each time we do have it, money comes into play and we seem to just go with the money, right?
Yes.
If we could fully grasp the fact of the importance, it's like, I was talking to somebody about Choice FM. If Choice had actually understood the importance and the value and the worth of what that business was, today they would be standing paramount on their own without nobody to challenge them, being able to put across a narrative that is black.
Yeah.
There is nothing on radio that puts across a narrative that's us on national radio. It's always been the same.
Down, diluted,
always been the same.
To be seen
always
as such
been the same.
Acceptable, should we
coming
say.
coming back to what's the change, other than technology, not much.
Yeah.
Not much, because, right, the same things are applied to us, but just in a new way.
Yes. Well, there you have the man. I mean, it's just amazing to have you.
No, thank you.
With your busy schedule, what do you do to look after yourself? To keep you grounded. I mean, obviously, I know there's the family. And
it really is the family. It's. I have my friends are friends that I had from I was 7.
Beautiful.
Right.
That's very
and
grounded.
We still hook up. We still have a laugh. We still do completely mad things as older men, right? Together as a laugh. And I think those things. I think also my friends within the industry, right, have been incredibly true to me, right? And that's,
which is important. Support is important.
Oh gosh, in this game you need it. It gives you strength. And I have to say thanks and give thanks for those things. For those things. I think keeping myself the way I am, it's got a lot to do with, it is them kids. They play football all the time, and they're granddad, and granddad loves football, you know. Right? He loves football, right? Can't play like he used to, but he loves it, you know. And I truly believe that the family that plays together stays together.
Yeah.
And I just believe that.
The family, the friends. You know, you communicate, you stay together, you stay grounded, and you'll stay together.
And I think, you know, you can have friends who you never speak to for maybe a year or 2 years, and as we all know, you pick up the phone and you're on them. But when you're with your family, you're watching characters grow. You're watching, right, little things that they'll
personalities coming through.
Yeah, and how to approach that kid, how to try and help him.
And this one's different from that one.
And that one's different. The older one might be a bit more quieter and softer, whereas the one who's 13 carries on like if he's God's gift, and the one who's 10, he's quiet too, but boy, can he do what he needs to do. And the 7-year-old, she's talking like if she was 25. I love it. I just get off on it. And I think that also is the inspiration with my writing. It's also the inspiration with the music. It's when my 13-year-old turned around, right? I know we got to wind this up, but when my 13-year-old turned around and told me that, like, I heard one of your songs on YouTube, Grandad. And what song was that? Some song called Look What You Done To Me, but it was firing, Grandad, firing. I went and looked for the tune. I didn't even remember the tune.
Oh, really? Brilliant.
I didn't even remember the tune. But he said he's firing when I went and, it's like a Latin track that it would have been the last thing I would have thought that this kid would have listened to.
Oh, really? You didn't even remember your own tune.
I didn't even remember the tune, right? And when I went and looked for it, I'm like, oh, he can't have liked this. I had to ring him. I said, yeah, Johnny, you sure that's true? Right? Like, that's a tune, Grandad. That's a tune. I love things like that.
But that's the greatness of being a creative and an artist.
Love that.
The penny drops with the strangest and oddest of people where you don't even expect it. It's, you know?
Africa, Nigeria, I popped in day, right? One tune, you know, communication breakdown. Nobody don't know, no, Mama used to say. communication breakdown, and that's the truth. So I love it. Different parts of the world you're going to, and people are getting off on different parts of you at different parts in your life.
Yeah.
Come on, man. If I'd done a 9 to 5, I would have never enjoyed life like this. I would have never grown in the way that I've grown. I would never be the man that I'm sitting here today. Because on a 9 to 5, I'd still be thinking about, Jesus, how am I going to pay the mortgage still? I have another 2 years payment. Or I'm going to this. I have a car loan. I'm going to that. Show me if you go so and so. I'm the car, go so and so, because I don't have no money. Jesus! No, I don't want to go through all of that. I always wanted for my life, I suppose, what I've got.
Yeah.
I've always wanted what I've got, which is, 1, I wanted to be successful making music. 2, I wanted to touch people. 3, I wanted that stuff to stay around. 4, which would have been 1, most important, if I had a family, that my family stayed together, that I did whatever was necessary and whatever was possible to ensure that to happen.
Yeah.
That my kids, between them, had a good relationship and there wasn't any jealousy between them. Those were the things that were the most important. Yeah.
And you got them.
And that's why I said I'm very fortunate. You know, I am, because I don't work when everybody else is working because I don't need to.
Right.
Give thanks. Right? You understand?
Yeah,
Give thanks.
Absolutely.
Right? I take none of this that I have for granted in any shape, form or fashion. We go back to Jamaica and give computers, if I buy them, and I buy computers and I'll take down and I'll give it to a school, trainers, things like this. You don't have to go out there and tell people, that's what I do.
Beautiful.
But this is what I
do. Gratitude and not entitlement, and
You've got to say thanks. You've got to say thanks, haven't you? I mean, look at this. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, pleasure, man. Thank you very much.
The man himself, Junior Giscombe.
Respect.
Now, if anything in the show resonates with you, please leave it in your comments. We look forward to hearing from you and seeing you next time. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Wicked. Thank you, man.
Yeah, man.
No, thank you.